Created in 2005 and hosted by security industry veterans, Paul Security Weekly is your source for in-depth coverage of the latest vulnerabilities, exploits, and security research. Our weekly security news discussion dives deep into the security issues we face today and potential solutions in a fun and lively atmosphere. Each week, we bring on guests from the security community to learn about their journey and discuss topics relevant to their work and research. You can also subscribe to our show by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Paul Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher. We've recorded a ton of content over the years, so we created Spotify playlists featuring some of our favorite episodes, including interviews with Marcus Random, John McAfee, and Chris Roberts, to name a few. You can find them at securityweekly.com/starter packs.
Welcome to RSA Conference. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by Flexxon, and I'm your host, Mandy Logan. Joining me today for the interview is Camilla Chan, CEO and co-founder of Flexxon. Cam, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Nice to meet you as well, Mandy.
Thank you. So this is thoroughly exciting. You're here getting to launch Server Defender.
Yes.
A brand new tool, brand new security module that complements and expands the X5 series of products that Flexxon already brought to market.
Yeah.
Now this I find intriguing and fascinating. Can you go into a quick synopsis of what the Server Defender does and why were you drawn to creating it?
So in a nutshell, X5 Server Defenders is trying to protect the whole infrastructure of the server. And then we create these independent modules that you just need to simply plug into your server. And then it provides a full stack, 7 layers holistic protection mechanism. So everything is back from the physical layer and then up to the upper 6 layers. Yeah. I mean, just make it simple how to describe these server defenders. Yeah.
So this to me, and seeing the approach that you took to finally finding a way to create security that takes the place of embedded security. We're talking about having something at the BIOS level, at firmware level, of being able to act as if our hardware was already secure, but being able to have it across any platform, any server. The issue I find often with our current cybersecurity posture is that it's software-based.
Yeah.
This, however, goes more into being hardware-based, even though it's an add-on. Correct?
So I just want to highlight the whole concept of our new technology is we are trying to address today's cybersecurity gaps. Software solutions, they have formed very robust ecosystem to fight against the known threats. So meaning that all the threats that have been maintained in the database, I mean the external upper 6 layers that solely rely on software, they are effectively counter against the known threats. Yeah. But then what we are lacking of today is we don't have something in the hardware or rather in the memory itself. So today, hackers, what they are trying to after, or memory is actually become a prime target for the hackers because basically all your system informations or the user data is residing inside the memory itself. So we are trying to put a stop protection mechanism right at the last medium. So this become a last medium that intercepting with the attacking signal real time. In that way, we are able to achieve a real-time detection that counter against such a, whether it's a known or unknown threats, especially the zero-day attack, which is lacking off today. Yeah. So software-based is more reactive in the nature of the cybersecurity solutions. And what we are lacking of is something that able to deal with the zero-day attack.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we mentioned earlier when speaking, talking about the difference in having a police force externally that is reactionary versus having your home ultimately secured from inside.
Yeah.
In your testing so far, what have you found to be some of the most exciting metrics that have been found?
So we embed the AI, we have our patented AI matrix seal that embedded into the independent modules that we have developed. So these embedded modules sit inside the server itself that able to monitor all the activities across the 7 layers. And then we are trying to validate things happening in the memory chipset and then verifying the upper 6 layers, what is happening out there. So we are able to cross-check. But if you look at the current cybersecurity software approach, basically they are part of the process. So meaning that the decision will be easily manipulated by others components. So meaning that you could be manipulated by your upper layers or the lower layers. And the current approach, you have a silo view because you sit in that particular layers and you don't have a holistic view of across the 7 layers. And now we embed this AI right at the core, which is able to protect the data and the system directly. Yeah, it's not just relying on the one layer, but have an independent, and then we step out and look at the 7 layers holistically. Yeah, so you are not just one layer or silo view and database approach. That's the best to complement on top of the existing software-based solution. Yeah.
Well, and what you're saying then, it also requires that the bad actors have to comply with what XFi is doing in order to even attempt to get close.
Yeah, Mandy, you are right. Because once we build this hardware, right, so meaning that everybody have to comply within the protocol. We build this enclave environment, whether you are the hackers or you are the defenders. When the data stream come down to the physical layer, the hardware layer, you have to comply within this protocol. Yeah. So this make the detection mechanism effective. And another thing is to highlight is we have a very powerful restorations mechanism.
Yes, that's my next question. Really, please, go into the instant reversion that's capable, that XFi brings. How is instant reversion possible?
So the reason why we are able to achieve such a powerful analysis, right, is because our patented matrix seal that able to analyze such a huge data out there and then translate the huge data into a fundamental elementary numeric representation. Right. So a small numbers, a small data that represent a huge data out there. So basically our server defenders, we don't keep the user raw data. This is a hardware-based solutions, and everything, even though your system or your data being compromised, we have this live reversion or instant restorations mechanism to be able to reverse to the working and good state of your server.
And I'm curious, have you had any experience in your testing seeing how effective it is even when a system is ransomed?
Okay, so basically, in-house, we have modified a lot of the malware, ransomware, and then trying to test out our solutions. But one of the key highlights is because our AI algorithm it will autonomously learn the new thing, learn the new patterns of the ransomware, malware, or different behavior. But it takes two key inventive innovation elements to make these server defenders to be very effective is, first of all, we break the boundaries of the 7 layers approach. So if you look at the current cybersecurity solutions, they are layers approach. Meaning that each of the solutions you have to comply the OSI network architecture's layers, and then you are kind of like, I keep emphasizing that you are part of the process and you are manipulated. But for us, is the independent view. So this is the first inventive elements. And second inventive elements is our patented metric seals, that we are able to analyze such a huge data that across the 7 layers, which it would take at least a server kind of computing infrastructure in order to analyze such a huge environment. But now with just a small embedded module, we are able to do so is because of our patented algorithm. Yeah.
So quickly, if this had been implemented prior to the Change Healthcare compromise,
Yeah.
how would you see it have gone differently?
If you look at the recent attack, ICBC, MGM, or even the very famous attack, the United, Health, the Change Healthcare, if they deploy server defenders, the service will not be disrupted. You will not lose your reputation because you are able to identify the threats. Real-time detection, because the failure is because of the 0-day kind of threats. It's a new threat where software are good at addressing the known
threats. Absolutely.
Yes, not the new threats. Yeah. But here, because our focus is on the system and data protection. But if you are talking about any things that in the external layer that involve your human elements, like for example scam, because it's a human decision. But then when it comes to things like data or system configuration that residing inside the memory, then the memory or our mechanism will take place to run it autonomously without human intervention. So meaning that we don't rely on humans to constantly updating or doing the patches, maintain the database, because only by maintaining the database you are able to identify the known threats. Yeah. And another thing is it take at least one to be compromised for you to maintain your database, to update your database. So it doesn't effective when it comes to 0-day kind of attack.
Absolutely. So to this, for any that are familiar with the movie Minority Report, sounds like this is as close as we can get at this moment, utilizing big data to create a predictive, it's almost a predictive metric to show here's where it's going to happen.
Yep.
To me, that's thrilling. That allows the security practitioners and the teams to have that much more firmly rooted assurance and be able to relay that to their customers.
Yeah.
Do you feel that when they effectively describe how Server Defender helps their company, that they can garner greater trust from clients and from others, contractors?
Yeah, definitely. Like United Healthcare, user or the patients no longer trust the doctor, but the doctor is not the one that given out the information. It's the system, it's the failure of the protections to the system and the client's personal informations, the sensitive informations. So I welcome, especially those critical infrastructures sectors that like healthcare or financial sector, and come and try out our beta samples to be the early adopters. You can go for you can create a sandboxing kind of testing environment, and then you can create all kinds of new zero attack or new zero threats to try out on the server defenders and to see that whether this is effective or not.
And now that possibility will be launched tomorrow.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. We are going to soft launch tomorrow, and then we really inviting a very serious early adopter to validate our technology and our solutions together.
Wonderful. So I want to invite all of our listeners to really look into Flexxon And the Server Defender tool that is being released tomorrow is part of your X5 series of security modules.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us, Cam. I
Thank
hope
you,
can
Mandy.
Have a wonderful launch day tomorrow.
I really love your story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And I love that you have 40 patents. I'm just impressed that you've been able to get through securing 40 independent patents.
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenging journey, but it's very satisfying. And we were even invited by the White House to
Yes.
showcase our technology.
And that's beautiful. Like the cyber resiliency program, especially for critical infrastructure, it's something that's near and dear to my heart because we want to get to the bottom line, not just on saving money for corporations, but really helping secure health and life going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to emphasize that we are here to help to get rid of the human stress. You don't have to worry about clicking on any phishing email or unknown
Exactly.
files.
So we can actually go fishing in real world instead.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being with us, Cam.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And please, to follow up on the Security Defender release, go to securityweekly.com/Flexxon RSAC. From Broadcast Alley, thank you for joining us. Welcome to RSA Conference. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by DigiCert. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me is Amit Sinha, CEO of DigiCert. Amit, welcome.
Thank you, Mandy. It's a pleasure to be on the show here.
It has been fantastic. I'm so glad we had a few minutes to talk right before because you learned how much of a certificate nerd I am, even though we have many other things to discuss. I'm really intrigued by your take on, I noticed in some of your information, you said that even in just the past 2 years, the degree of digital trust has been pushed to its limits. Will you talk more about DigiCert and what is meant by that statement?
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. Like DigiCert's been the global leader of digital trust solutions, for many organizations. And people often ask me, what is digital trust? And it's foundational infrastructure that makes sure that all of these interactions that we have online, whether it's with your bank's website or your Alexa device or a piece of software that you download from the App Store, or just anything digital out there, how do you make sure that it is what they say they are? And, how do you make sure that when you communicate with these devices or systems, your communication is encrypted and secure? So digital trust is foundational infrastructure that makes all of this happen behind the scenes. And DigiCert's been the leading provider of all of these solutions for over 20 years. Over 80% of Fortune 500 organizations use us, and there are tens of thousands of organizations that use us, and there'll be several that don't even know that they are using us, but they do because it's such foundational infrastructure.
Absolutely. It is not, I feel like it's not just the backbone, because the backbone obviously is all the networking, everything else we have going on. But we're here in San Francisco, and we're near the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right.
And I think of the certificates as very similar to all the rivets, everything that is actually holding and making that structure secure and capable to make the traffic safe.
Yeah.
And my guess with the number of end devices that are using DigiCert, it's got to be in the billions.
Yeah, Mandy, you'd be surprised to know that 1 billion televisions in Europe all get their birth certificates and identity through DigiCert. Air conditioners in India that are now connected are getting Matter-based certificates from DigiCert. DigiCert became the first independent certificate authority for the North American plug and charge standard. So, when you take your EV and you just connect it to a charging network, how does it know it's Mandy's car or my car? And how does it know, who to bill, right? So there'll be 75 billion IoT devices next year, 10 times more than humans. And these are all connected devices. How do you make sure that a device is secure and trustworthy? And it goes back to kind of basics, Mandy. Like, you probably use an iPhone or an Android. How's that secured? It starts with so it's an Apple device. Apple has some trusted credentials, some trusted certificates on a TPM that makes that device tamper resistant. And when you get software on these devices, they're kind of signed by the Apple ecosystem. So this is a trusted device getting trusted software. How do you make that happen for $200, $300, $400 devices and not just kind of the expensive high-end phones? That's kind of the core trust challenge. And lots of interesting standards have evolved. For example, Matter is a standard for security and interoperability within your home. How do you make your Alexa device talk to Google Home, to an Apple device? And again, DigiCert was the first attested certificate authority for the Matter standard to allow some of these things to happen.
Well, that's fascinating. And I think for you, like with being part of DigiCert, which does have basically an ancient standing in digital space, 20 years
right
in this world, but you're also at the cutting edge with already thinking ahead on like quantum computing and being able to certify that the information being passed back and forth is actually from the correct source and going to the correct person or the correct endpoint.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more on?
Yeah, absolutely. Quantum cryptography is one of the big topics being discussed at RSA. And why is that, right? A lot of the trust that we talk about are based on these mathematical problems that are, impossible for even the best supercomputers that exist today to crack, right? So, for example, RSA 2048-bit encryption and authentication is used pervasively, and it's based on factorizing these prime numbers that, very large 1,000, 2,000 digit prime numbers that'll take tens of thousands of years, right, on traditional computers. But a quantum computer, because it has spooky properties like superposition and can exist in these multiple parallel states, can, if there was a stable quantum computer with enough qubits, it could basically break all of these codes in minutes. And so the very foundational trust infrastructure on the internet, whether it's trusting your bank's web server or signing a document and making sure that it's not being tampered with, or software or IoT, all these things are based on that same math, right? Which is vulnerable to quantum computers, right? Now there's a race going on between IBM and Microsoft and Google to develop quantum computers, and it becomes a double-edged sword. On one hand, they can solve classes of problems that, is just impossible today, like climate modeling or figuring out, the next protein molecule, right? But it also makes current cryptography vulnerable. So what's happening is, NIST is pushing out these 4 post-quantum cryptography algorithms, 1 for encrypting keys and 3 for signing content. And it'll be available as FIPS standards in later this summer. So a lot of our customers are beginning to talk about crypto agility. How do I, it's kind of like a Y2K problem of our generation. How do I upgrade all this foundational cryptographic infrastructure to make it quantum safe?
Which is absolutely mind-boggling. And it's also exciting to be at this point in time where we get to see the foundational parts of quantum computing. We're getting to see that bedrock laid, and you're getting to be part of that. And even though we aren't to the point where we really have to worry about a brute force attack by a quantum computer taking 2 seconds, where we've done everything we possibly could to secure it, what are other unintended consequences of innovation that you do see and want to address right now?
Yeah, the other big theme, of course, the pervasive theme at RSA has been AI, right? And I've always said AI, when it comes to cybersecurity, is a double-edged sword, right? On one hand, it can make SOC teams operationally efficient. Cybersecurity and threat companies can use AI to do a better job of detecting threats, to analyzing next generation of threats and all of that. But those same generative AI tools can be leveraged to do a very targeted phishing attack with a deep fake. They can be
Absolutely.
used to automate a very aggressive, pen test like campaign to break into your defenses, right? So it is a double-edged sword. It helps security companies, but it also helps hackers become more efficient. And you need AI to fight AI, kind of almost like AI cyber warfare. But the other kind of unintended consequences around include, for us as trust authorities, and our overall solutions are designed to provide digital trust for the real world. And we talked about content. I mean, we're recording a video here, and how do I know that this video is not a deep fake or someone has edited or changed what I was saying?
Right.
So there's the whole content provenance angle as well, right? Like media companies, and we're working with content platforms to essentially certify the authenticity of media, that this is truly where it came from and changes have not been applied, right? So that's one area of unintended consequences, with deep fakes and what have you. The other is, the whole software supply chain, and I talk about this quite often. We work with a lot of software companies, and they're developing software. There's a mad rush to put in AI, and you really don't know what's inside these AI models, right? You can find, someone might have fine-tuned it with a backdoor, and suddenly you have a model which is just numbers. It's a probabilistic model. You can't even ask the model to give you the backdoor, or you can't analyze code snippets to say, this looks suspicious. So how do I protect my software supply chain with all of these, models, and there's a wild west out there, to make sure that what I'm shipping as a software company, is trusted software, right? So we're working with, a lot of software and product companies to essentially, have a trustworthy supply chain, have components that have been inspected. Here's a software bill of materials. Here's the final piece of software that is signed by you, so it's kind of legitimate and authentic and tamper resistant. So it's back to, again, trust. Components are, you might have a hardware IoT device, you might have some software, making sure that all of these, when they come together, are trustworthy, is kind of core to our mission.
Well, and that right there, that being core to the mission of having the trust, that is the baseline factor that we as humans always search for. When there is no trust, you can't have no growth. You cannot go into the arts and creativity and looking forward to envisioning a society that is healthier and does work better.
Right.
I'm curious, is there any one particular challenge for IoT devices that is near and dear to your heart?
Yeah, the question of IoT, Mandy, it's think about the FBI did a survey and found out that over half of the critical medical devices which are now connected have all kinds of vulnerabilities, right? Now, you don't want your pacemaker to be hacked. You don't want your, infusion pump and glucose monitors to have, kind of jailbroken software running on it, right? So I think the challenge with overall IoT is, first, they have limited resources. They're not like your iPhones and desktop computers, right? They are inexpensive, so cost becomes a factor. And you need, so DigiCert, for example, has an IoT Trust Manager solution that will integrate with your manufacturing line. So, for example, if you're manufacturing air conditioners in Gujarat in India, you might not have reliable internet connectivity, right? And you want to make sure that the certificates that will go onto these devices are available offline, and the whole process is integrated well with your assembly line, so you don't stall production because, I don't know, you didn't have cloud connectivity, right? So it is around bringing trust to these IoT devices. They are resource constrained. There are lots of different manufacturing environments, and DigiCert's IoT Trust Manager solution is designed to give you the flexibility, to give you over-the-air updates, to work in offline mode, to integrate with your manufacturing lines. And product security companies, whether it's on medical devices or EVs or TVs or air conditioners, they are able to incorporate that into their overall operational process.
Well, and that sounds like the beauty of mathematics that has already reduced because now you're talking about multiple countries, multiple devices, languages, mindsets, all of these things that go into the actual manufacturing. So whether it's on the software side, a hardware side, or just a regular IoT device.
That's correct.
Does it excite you to go like, wow, with what DigiCert is doing, being able to get to this mathematical baseline of ensuring trust, which ultimately helps each individual within each organization feel healthier?
Yeah, as a company, our mission is digital trust for the real world, right?
Right.
And a lot of the stuff that we do, Mandy, is so foundational, right? When we talk to our customers in healthcare, trust equals life and death, right? So we take that responsibility very seriously. When we talk to our customers in finance, right? For them, trust is everything. You don't want your financial, information to leak out, and when you're interacting with your banks, you want all of that to be trustworthy and reliable. So, trust is kind of the foundation of what we do, and it's our North Star, and we're really, really excited to be the kind of the global provider helping tens of thousands of customers, become trustworthy.
That's awesome. Thank you, Amit, for your time, and definitely for anything increasing trust. We appreciate this.
Thank you, Mandy. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining Security Weekly. Please visit securityweekly.com/DigiCert RSAC to find out more. You can also check out all of our RSAC coverage at securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thank you.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2024. We're recording live from Broadcast Alley here in Moscone West. It's day 3 of RSA Conference. This interview is sponsored by Cisco. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, and joining me for this interview is Jitu Patel. He's the Executive Vice President and General Manager at Cisco in the Security and Collaboration Group. Welcome, Jitu.
Good to see you, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we're going to talk Hypershield.
All right.
I got to tell you a quick little story, though.
Yeah.
So I ran strategy for Tenable for years. In 2015,
Amit's a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I helped recruit him over, actually. One of the things in my strategy plan I said is there's going to be 3 security controls that CISOs will always own, regardless of what happens in the cloud.
Okay.
User, data, and the application.
Yep.
So that's been a really interesting thesis for me, and something we've covered on the shows a lot, also around my investment thesis. And it's interesting to see, products continue to evolve in the space. So let's start with why Hypershield? Why'd you build Hypershield?
I think every once in a while in tech, and we've seen a few of these during our lifetime, the client-server revolution, mobile, the internet. I think AI is one of those. And I think the scale proportion at which the data centers are going to operate in the future is going to be very different from anything we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And we're kind of entering into this era of which will feel like abundance, where we've lived in a world of scarcity for the past 6,000 years, 7,000 years. We're now going to feel like, we're living in this era of abundance. And here's the challenge is the data center architecture is going to need to be fundamentally reimagined on 2 dimensions, right? The applications is one, where you're moving from the 3-tiered or n-tiered architecture to microservices. There'll be thousands of microservices running on hundreds of pieces of hardware and Kubernetes containers and VMs. And then the second area is that, the specialized computational subsystems, whether it be GPUs or DPUs or LPUs or whatever, those are going to continue to keep kind of evolving. So you will go much more from sequential to parallel processing, and the throughput capacity is going to be very different. As that happens, the underlying infrastructure for data centers will also need to change from a security perspective to accommodate for the highly distributed nature that we are in with applications today.
Right.
And so today's infrastructure just doesn't work. Now, securing everything is hard.
Yes.
Securing applications is hard. Securing infrastructure is hard. And there's three challenges that we've been told about time and time over again by our customers that end up being huge, kind of bottlenecks for them in doing whatever they need to do to go out and secure the infrastructure. Number one, in this world where you assume that an attacker is already in your system and that the way that the attack is going to spread is through lateral movement, segmenting is really hard. Because it was easy to segment when you had a three-tiered architecture.
You had a network and you had DMZs and you could...
And you could just, each piece of hardware could get segmented out.
Right.
It's very hard to do that when you have microservices on multiple pieces of hardware, all talking to each other through APIs. I have my payment cluster that can talk to my shopping cart cluster, but I can't talk to my developer cluster. How do I go about setting those policies? Super hard to do, right? So segmentation is really hard. Number two, patching is a huge problem. And what I mean by that is today, from the day that a vulnerability is announced to when an exploit occurs is now single-digit days, compressing down to hours and minutes.
Right.
It takes about 25 to 49 days to actually test and deploy a patch from the time that a vulnerability is announced. So you've got this massive gap between when a vulnerability is announced and when you're going to actually patch it and how quickly the adversary is actually going out and doing an exploit. Right.
And if you're using open source or some other libraries that you don't even control, it could be even longer.
It could be even longer. So, and by the way, there might be things that never get patched because they've gone end of life or end of sale or what have you. So that becomes a really huge problem. And then the third problem is updating dated infrastructure is really hard. And even updates based on policy changes tends to be really hard. So, why is that? Because you have two change control windows. You have to get your system down. There's one at Christmas, one at 4th of July in the US. It's just a hard thing to go out and coordinate. If you miss that window, you wait another 6 months. And so I'll tell you, interesting story is, we had a lot of issues with our firewall products a few years ago, and we fixed a lot of those issues. And customers would still complain because only 40% of our customers had upgraded to the newest version.
Oh, right.
Because most people hadn't upgraded, right? And so these three problems, segmenting, patching, and updates, were things that we said we ought to think about very differently because you've now have building blocks of technology that just weren't available in the past to be able to reimagine the problem space and ideally reimagine the solution space very differently. Now, the analogy I like to give people is imagine if Amazon were built in 1475. It would be an epically failed company because you didn't have the logistics infrastructure in place, you didn't have the PC revolution, you didn't have the internet revolution, so it wouldn't have succeeded, right? We now have all the necessary building blocks to be able to build on top of that could allow us to think about not just a new product, but a completely reimagined architecture. And there's three building blocks, if you care for me to share with you.
Yes, I want to know how you solve this.
So the three building blocks are one, AI, of course, where the operative word in AI is can we build it natively in the product so that when you think about a mechanism for defense, you've actually thought about it with AI natively in the product rather than an afterthought that's patched on.
Right.
So that's number one. And I think it's going to allow us to do magical things that just weren't possible before.
Yeah,
and
I imagine what you mean by AI is not just an LLM chatbot kind of thing, like real artificial intelligence models and engines that can process and manage data, right?
That can dynamically segment and adjust segmentation for you in a very different way, right? Things like that. So that's number one. Number two is I think in security specifically, you cannot protect something that you don't have visibility towards. In a world where the endpoint is assumed to be compromised, the attacker is in the system, and there's lateral movement that's occurring, but the traffic is going to be end-to-end encrypted, it's going to be really hard to tell what is out of the pattern of normal that's actually flowing through your network, right? And so what you have to have is you need to make sure that you know where a process is originating and where it terminates. And you have to know also what's where it's being transmitted. But the challenge is because of end-to-end encryption, your visibility goes down quite a bit on the transmission. So what you need to have is enough observability on the server side, on the host, to know exactly the I/O operations and the processes that are getting kickstarted in the operating system at the kernel level. Right? And eBPF is a technology, I know you've actually been very familiar with this. eBPF is a technology that can really be game-changing in this one area.
It gives you that visibility.
It gives you that visibility without sitting in the kernel. It sits in user space,
Right.
but it gives you all the inputs you need to have to know what's actually transpiring
Right.
at every I/O level and at every I/O operation and every process.
Right.
Did
Did that process fork? Did it crash? Did it restart? Did it create a network connection? Having spent time in the container security space, that visibility is so important, especially if you can't get it at other layers in the stack.
That's exactly right. So that's the second one.
Yep.
So the first one was AI. The second one is kernel level visibility via eBPF. And the third one then is hardware acceleration. We've had this kind of era that we're living in with high performance computing where we've moved from sequential processing on CPUs to GPUs and DPUs. And what I'm talking about specifically is DPUs, which are basically data processing units that sit on NICs that are specialized subsystems that really allow you to do repetitive network functions like connection management, encryption, and security operations at very different scale proportions. So you could probably be 1,000 times faster than what you used to be in the past, right? And so the combination of those three allow us to do things that are magical, where you don't have to think about taking 40 days to segment your applications. You can have autonomous segmentation. You don't need to figure out a way to wait for 49 days for a patch getting applied. You can actually have near instantaneous distributed exploit protection without patching that can be put in place. So about 8 to 12 to 15 minutes from the time that a vulnerability is announced, we might be able to have a compensating control that can shield that vulnerability instantly.
Interesting.
Right?
So kind of like the old virtual patching concept back in the day, but actually applying it almost in real time.
And distribute it out to every enforcement point that you might have. So what we would do is you would basically take security and take it to the workload rather than bringing the workload to the security.
Got it.
So every IoT device, every OT device, every microservice, every container will actually have this shield in front of it that can do auto segmentation, autonomous segmentation. It can do, instantaneous compensating controls, near instantaneous compensating controls. And then the third thing it does is this notion of updates, right? Imagine if you had your updates in infrastructure that happen like your iPhone happens, where it's almost near instantaneous, but it's fully autonomous, by the way. It's self-qualifying, but it doesn't happen without testing out what the changes are. The big challenges that you have, the reason that people don't do automatic updates to the firewalls right now is not because you can't do it. It's because they're worried that something's going to break because the firewall rules were written by Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin, way back when, retired, and then someone else has come in, and so there's this issue. And so what we need to do is figure out a way that you can have autonomous updates, self-qualifying updates. And so the way that we do it is you can have two simultaneous data paths, version 1 and version 2, right? Not in a simulated environment, in your production environment. In real time, to see the difference. And the only reason you can do that is silicon is so fast now that you can actually have two parallel data paths that are going with the same stream of data. And then you do a diff at the end. You say, oh, well, version 1 and version 2 don't look like they're that different after running it for 30 days. It's actually good for us to go out and swap the primary to the shadow and the shadow to the primary. Run it for another 15 days. And then you can automatically update. And you can have a human in the loop as long as you don't trust the system. And once you start trusting the system, like the first few times when I actually did my iPhone updates, I would always back up my iPhone, make sure everything was okay before I did the update. I don't do that anymore. It just happens at night.
Yeah.
But that's because the trust got built over time.
Right.
And so those are the three things that HyperShield does that completely are game-changing from an architecture perspective.
Well, you brought up trust, right? A lot of people don't trust AI yet, right? Because in an LLM, it could hallucinate, right? So you're not going to let your systems just run autonomously with AI decision making, right? But where AI is really good, and which is where I think you're focused, is it gives you the ability to monitor activities, monitor stuff, help make recommendations around decisions that help you build a level of trust with it so that over time, it may do more things automatically, but it's giving us power that we never had before at scale.
And you would always have the human in the loop.
Right.
If you have a human in the loop, you can make the decision until you say, okay, this is fine. I'm
Right.
now starting to see enough data points where I feel comfortable in this particular area. I don't need to have a human in the loop. And if you always want to have a human in the loop, more power to you.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's what people need to figure out,
Yep.
right, over time. I remember the days of intrusion protection systems. You probably have some of these scars from way back when, right?
Yeah.
Nobody would put them in prevention mode because nobody trusted that they
No one
wouldn't
trusted
shut
them.
down
Exactly.
part of the network that would stop traffic flow. That's why people don't auto-update the firewalls, right? Those are some of the challenges. We're going to face the same things with some of these AI systems. People are going to want to see how it works. They're going to want to see the efficiency that can gain them. And then as they trust it more and more, then turn these things on.
And this, by the way, this is not a new, you shouldn't think about this as just a new product from Cisco. This is a brand new way of thinking about security, which is hyper distributed.
Right.
And the security is wherever you need it to be, in front of every workload, on an oil rig, on an MRI machine, in a robot welder, on a drone, in your data center, in your infrastructure, wherever you need it to be. We will make sure that security enforcement points will be made distributed but fully coordinated with each other.
Well, in a world where the perimeter is the endpoint, the IoT device, the phone, the human,
That's right.
you have to be distributed.
You have to be distributed.
Or you're not going to be able to solve these challenges.
Exactly right. And the way we think about this is, in a world which is going to be end-to-end encrypted, most workloads are going to be distributed all over the different place. You need to make sure that you know what's originating from the endpoint and what's terminating at the host.
Right.
And have full visibility across the board. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to protect and have the right level of defenses.
And thus Hypershield.
Thus Hypershield.
G2, thank you so much for joining us on this interview segment.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. If anybody wants to get more information, please visit securityweekly.com/Cisco RSAC. And also check out all of our coverage from RSA Conference at securityweekly.com/RSAC. Stay tuned. We have more interviews on the way.